Hi, and welcome to Anatomy Amy Yoga. I'm Amy, and today we're going to be going over anatomical terms of location and direction. These terms are really important for anybody studying human anatomy, whether it's for a professional certification, for an anatomy class, or even your own personal development. These terms are important because they're how we speak about the human body. They remove ambiguity, they help you communicate clearly when you're reading, when you're speaking. They're a very important foundation to lay before you really get into more human anatomy. So today we're going to go over these terms while we practice yoga. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. In today's Anatomy Amy Yoga practice, we are going to go over the general terms of location and direction. And to start this, our first pose is going to be mountain pose or anatomical position. This pose is really important in both yoga and anatomy, so it's a great place to start. For mountain pose, you want your toes facing forward, heels facing back, with your feet about hips width distance apart. Your chin and chest are both facing forward. And then go ahead and turn your palms so that they're facing forward as well. So here we are standing in mountain pose or anatomical position. You'll probably see this in a lot of textbooks because this is the position that these terms are in reference to. So when we talk about our different terms of anatomy, they're from this position, anatomical position. Starting here, we're going to go over inferior, which is closest to the feet or below, and superior, which means above or closest to the crown of the head. So here's our first two terms here in anatomical position. So our toes, or the bottom of our feet, are the most inferior part of our body because they're below the rest of the body, and our top of our head is the most superior because it's above the rest of the body. So those are the two extremes here, but obviously those terms are used for everything in between as well. So let's start by bringing some attention to our breath. Go ahead and take a nice, slow, deep inhale through your nose and out. And as you continue that breath pattern, try to feel where you feel your breath expanding your body. Do you feel it in your chest? Do you feel it in your belly? Really take some time to send the breath where it feels best for you today. Now, speaking of our chest and our belly, let's talk about those in terms like inferior and superior. So our belly is going to be inferior to our chest because it's closer to the bottom or our feet, basically. It's below. Whereas our chest is superior to our belly because it's above, closer to the top of our head. Our chest is also inferior to where you're inhaling, your nose and your mouth, because the chest is below our nose and mouth. Getting even more specific, our mouth is inferior to our nose, and our nose is superior to our mouth. So basically, inferior and superior are really talking about above and below, but below is always the bottom of our foot, and above is always the top of our head, which makes superior and inferior very specific anatomical terms. So here in mountain pose or anatomical position, take one more nice deep inhale. And exhale, start to bring your feet together, heel toeing here so that our big toes are touching, our heels can be almost touching. Because we're going to transition into chair pose where we'll go over our next two terms. So inhale, sweep the arms out, up, overhead. And as you exhale, just send these hips back a little bit, not letting our knees go too far forward, really focusing on sending the hips back like we're sitting down into a chair for chair pose. Now, inferior and superior have two very similar terms, cranial and caudal. Caudal means closer to the tail or below, and cranial means closer to the head or above. These terms are used a little bit more commonly with our four-legged friends, where superior and inferior would be a bit harder. So with my doggy, I always think about cranial is closer to his head and caudal is closer to his tail. But you'll see these terms sometimes used with human anatomy as well, so it's good to know. So here, go ahead and sink your hips down just a little bit deeper, and we can think as we send our hips down that our hips are caudal to our chest, and go ahead and let your shoulders relax down a little bit, our shoulders being cranial to our hips because they're closer to the head or the top. So very similar to inferior and superior, but here we have cranial and caudal. Take one more nice deep inhale, and as you exhale, we're going to forward fold, bring your hands down in front of you, chest towards your thighs here into a nice forward fold. Go ahead and bend your knees deeply. In this forward fold, we're going to go over the terms anterior and ventral. Again, meaning very similar things. Anterior is pertaining to the front of the body, as is ventral. Ventral used a little bit more commonly in comparative anatomy, whereas anterior used a little bit more in human anatomy specifically. So in this forward fold, bring your attention to the anterior parts of your body, the ones closest to the front. So you have your shins, the front of your knees, the front of your thighs, your belly, the front of your chest, the front of your neck, all those front parts of the body. And in this forward fold, bend your knees deeply enough so that you can actually let your chest rest on your thighs for a minute while you think about all the anterior or ventral parts of the body here. Take one more deep inhale. Exhale through your nose. And then on your next inhale, you're just going to slowly round up the spine one vertebrae at a time until you come up to standing, bringing your shoulders and your chin up last for a nice slow exhale here. And now we're going to bring our attention to the exact opposite terms, if you will, or the paired terms, which are going to be posterior and dorsal. Posterior and dorsal are pertaining to the back of your body. So for that, we're going to do just a gentle back bend. Go ahead and take your hands and place them right at the lower area of your back, as if you're putting fingertips into some back pockets here. Take a nice deep inhale, and as you exhale, just gently press the hips forward, letting your shoulders and your neck fall back a bit for a gentle back bend. Bring your attention to the dorsal or posterior parts of your body, like the back of your calves, the back of your thighs, your butt, the back, your back, and the back of your neck. And know that these are posterior because they're closer to the back of the body. Take a nice inhale back up to standing. Exhale, hands to your sides. Into our next pose, where we're going to go over a nice wide leg squat or goddess pose. So go ahead and step your feet out to the sides. And from here, you're going to turn your toes out a bit as well. In goddess pose, we want the knees to track right over the toes. So if you go into your squat and you notice that your knees are in, go ahead and adjust your toes so that your knees can be sent out over your toes. Take a nice inhale, sweep the arms up. And then as you exhale, sending the hips down, knees out, hands back down to your sides into our nice wide leg squat or goddess pose. Here, we're going to go over median or midline, and that's basically the line of the body that divides it into right and left halves. So go ahead and take your palms and bring them to your heart center here. And it's great because our palms are running right along the midline. If I had a string going from my nose to belly button, that string would be following the midline, that line that divides our body into right and left halves. So our hands are following the midline here. I chose to do a wide leg squat for midline because we took our feet away from it. Sink just a little bit deeper. Inhale all the way up. And then slowly heel toe your feet in towards the midline until you're back to standing. Beautiful. Now from here, we're going to go into tree pose. And from tree pose, we're going to go over lateral, which means away from the midline, and medial, which means in towards the midline. So we know our midline is just here. Go ahead and shift your weight into your left foot and come up onto the ball of your right foot. Now you're going to turn your right knee away from the midline, so out lateral, facing away from the midline, and the sole of your foot is facing in towards the midline, so it's facing medially. For tree pose, you can stay right here if this is helping work on your balance, or you can bring the sole of your foot to the inside of your calf, or all the way up to the inside of your upper thigh. We just want to avoid the knee. Don't place the foot right on the knee. We don't want to press on that joint. So for here, we know that our right knee is facing out laterally, and that our right foot, the sole of the foot, is facing in medially. Go ahead and grow your tree, bringing your palms up above you. And now the palms here are both facing in medially, and the back of our hands are facing away laterally. Take one more inhale in tree pose, and exhale everything back down to the center as we shift our weight into our right foot and come on up to the ball of our left foot for tree pose on the opposite side, where we're going to go over plantar, pertaining to the sole of the foot, palmar, the palms of our hands, and dorsal, which we know means the back of the body, but it also means the back of the hand and the top of the foot. So here in tree pose, as we turn our left knee out laterally away from the body, we are then going to bring the plantar surface of that left foot to either the inside of the calf or the inside of the thigh, just like we did on the opposite side, avoiding the knee. So here we know a new word for the sole of the foot. It's referring to the plantar side of the foot, and the top of the foot being the dorsal side. So plantar is facing in medially, and the dorsal is facing away laterally. Growing our hands up again, our palms are facing in medially, but we now know that's called the palmar side of our hand, and the dorsal sides of our hands are facing away laterally, because that's the back of our hand. Take one more inhale here in tree pose, and exhale everything back down to the center again. Nice job in your practice so far. We're going to go over our last set of terms during our last poses, which are going to be low lunges. So go ahead and come to the top of your mat if you're not there already, having some space behind you. Inhale, sweep the arms out, up and overhead. Exhale into another forward fold. Bring our hands to the mat and our chest towards our thighs. Take one inhale here to a flat back, lengthening out through the crown of the head, parallel to the ground. And exhale, plant both hands next to your feet, and go ahead and step your right foot back behind you, setting up for our low lunge. Now here you have the option to keep this knee raised, and that's going to be a bit more of a strength pose, or you can go ahead and lower the knee down and even set your foot down as well, so that when you come up, you're getting a bit more of a stretch. So you have either option, and you can use either option. You can switch between them as we're in the poses. I'm going to go ahead and keep my knee up for this low lunge or crescent pose. Now we want to set our foundation here by really drawing our left heel back and our right toes forward, kind of creating this energy where we're bringing the feet in towards each other, and that's going to set us up to inhale and sweep our arms up and overhead in our nice low lunge, where we'll go over proximal, which means closer to the base of the limb, and distal, which is further away from the base of our limb. So here, just like inferior and superior, we'll go over the extremes. Our fingertips are the most distal part of the limb because they're furthest away from the base of our arm here, and our shoulder is going to be the most proximal because it's closest to the base of that limb. So if we're talking about the relationship now, let's think about our wrist. Our wrist is going to be proximal to our fingertips because that's closer to the base of the limb than the fingertips are. Our wrist is also going to be distal from our elbow because the wrist is further away from the base of the limb than the elbow is. So again, these terms are a bit of a relationship. Proximal and distal are also only used for the limbs, so our arms and our legs. They're not used for our trunk here. Or if we want to get technical, they're used for the appendicular skeleton, which is arms and legs, not the axial, which is our trunk. Take one more deep inhale, and exhale, bring your hands down to frame your feet in this low lunge, looking at your toes, which are the most distal part of the lower limb, and then looking at your hip, which is most proximal, and considering the relationship one more time, where our knee is going to be distal to our hip because it's further from the base, but our knee is proximal to the ankle because it's closer to the base than the ankle. Go ahead and shift the weight into your left foot. Step your right foot up to meet the left. Take one more inhale to a flat back. And then exhale, forward fold again, stepping your left foot back behind you this time. For low lunge on the opposite side as we go over our last two terms, which are superficial and deep. So just like before, make sure that you're engaging your feet here, drawing your right heel back, your left toes forward, that your knee is going right over the toes, not in or out. And go ahead and inhale, sweep the arms up into our low lunge or crescent pose on the opposite side. So superficial is closer to the outside of the body, whereas deep is closer to the inside of the body. So pretty simple right now. I think of superficial as my skin and deep as the muscles that are working in this pose. So if you think about your sweat, it came from a deeper area of the body, and now it might be superficial because it might be closer to the outside if you have a little bit of sweat going on your limbs here. So take another deep inhale. Exhale, come down and frame the feet. And we can think about our deep muscles working and our superficial skin showing as we shift our weight into our right foot and step our left foot up to meet it. One more time, inhaling up to a flat back, and then exhaling down to a forward fold. From here, we're going to roll up the spine again, so bring a deep bend into your knees and roll up one vertebrae at a time. Slow and controlled. Shoulders and chin are last. Take a few rounds of breath here, inhaling and exhaling slowly through your nose. Just like you can use that breath to calm you before an exam on these terms, practice using that breath now to calm you after your yoga practice. Feel free to go back through this video again to get a little bit more comfortable with these terms of location and direction, and look out for other practices where I use yoga and I use those terms, kind of guiding you through a general practice. And I really invite you to join me on this Anatomy Amy yoga journey where we learn human anatomy through the practice of yoga. Have a great day.